We are live on Sports Book Review, Matthew. I am Richard Spanners Ready of Missed Apex Podcast. I'm joined by my regular co-host and host of E-Radio Show, Matt Trumpets. How you doing, Matt?
Oh, I'm doing great. There's nothing better than an afternoon wrestling technology to the ground.
Hey, we've made it. We're live on the internet talking to the people at Sportsbook Reviews for the first time. Matt and I host a regular live stream and podcast at 8 p.m. on the Spanners Ready YouTube channel. And wow, Matt, hasn't 2017 provided some great racing in Formula One so far?
Yes, it absolutely has. No processions this year.
Oh, until we get to Monaco. Look, we are here to give you a preview of the Monaco Formula One Grand Prix taking place this Sunday. Let's see if we can help you lay down your cash on some smart bets this weekend. Let's set the scene of the season so far because Monaco is a little bit different, but the Monaco Grand Prix may spell the end of the two-horse race we've had this season so far. The last 3 years, Mercedes, Petronas, AMG, F1 have been absolutely dominant in Formula One. This year, they've had Ferrari to contend with in the first few races, Matt.
Yeah, they have. And in fact, if you look at particularly the first stint in Barcelona, you'll realize straight away that on straight up race pace, the Ferrari has an edge on the Mercedes. And also, quite frankly, they seem to have an edge with tire wear as well. The problem comes, and especially at Monaco, with qualifying.
How so?
Well, of course, Monaco, of all of the tracks, is one of the most difficult in which to effect a pass that isn't either in the pits or strategic through a safety car. And Mercedes has retained an advantage over Ferrari, though it's been whittled away at each race.
So in qualifying trim, I still fancy the Mercedes to qualify in pole. And a lot of people will be betting on pole position, and we'll go to some specific bets later. But in Monaco, pole is absolutely key. The people who do well on a Saturday can just set up a roadblock. So for the last few races, we've seen quite a lot of overtaking, and race pace has been able to dominate over the qualifying pace. But in Monaco, if you can get a surprise shock result and get yourself up on pole, as we saw in 2013 with the slow Mercedes at that time, put themselves up front and just held position in front of Sebastian Vettel for the entire race.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is where it could get interesting, because in the last qualifying run in Barcelona, we know that Hamilton in the Mercedes did not do his very best job. But what a lot of people overlook is, were it not for the chicane that Vettel simply cannot drive around, he in fact would have had a faster time than Lewis. So he might be worth an outside look. Apologies, my cat has just entered the room.
Excellent. He can be part of the show as well. So what Matt's talking about is Sector 3 in Barcelona is often very, very indicative of form at Monaco, because in Sector 3 in Barcelona, you have two very tight 90-degree right-handers, very, very slow, into two right-hand turns onto the main straight. And generally, the cars that are set up well, that have good mechanical balance going into Sector 3, do well around the tight, twisty streets in the Principality of Monaco. And in the race 2 weekends ago, Lewis Hamilton was dominant in that last sector. Now, was it down to Lewis Hamilton's skill in that sector, or was it down to Vettel's ineptitude in that sector, or is the Ferrari just a handful in slow speed corners?
Well, I would say very much down to Vettel's ineptitude and Hamilton's brilliance in managing the tires, particularly through the third sector, which is generally, we've seen him sometimes take out a little bit slower pace in the first part of the lap and then have more grip at the end and have a lot more grip and make the difference there.
Okay, so going into Monaco qualifying and the race, what the guys need to know is out of the two cars at the front, so we have two teams at the front, Ferrari and Mercedes, the driver pairings there have a pecking order this season. It's very clear at Ferrari that Sebastian Vettel is the number one driver. So if you're going to bet on Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel really is the guy to go. It's not just on pure talent. The team will back him. They will use team orders to tell Kimi Raikkonen to let him through if need be. And Matt, you might argue with me here, but I feel that Lewis Hamilton is now the de facto number one at Mercedes.
Well, I mean, he is in the sense that he has more championship points and generally is faster. But I don't know that that means they'll necessarily order Bottas out of the way just yet.
See, now this is where I disagree with Matt slightly. I think you'll find if Valtteri Bottas is in front of Lewis Hamilton and not pulling away, that's crucial. If Bottas pulls away, they might let him pull away. If he's being held up in any way, I imagine that he will get a signal coming through saying Lewis is faster than you, Valtteri.
Oh, maybe, but Monaco's an awfully hard place to get around anyone. So it's going to be interesting to see because he could run at the front without running away just as easily as Lewis could, or Vettel, or Raikkonen, or Ricardo, or Verstappen. I mean, you get down to people like Stroll, maybe they're going to have a problem. But
hey, we'll get to the cars that aren't going to finish later. I have a specific lineup for cars that are going to retire. Hey, we've had we have had Ferrari, Mercedes all season long so far. But this is a track where Red Bull might actually come into it. They have high hopes for this track. Mind laying down why, Matt?
Well, in particular, they've been hard hit by the FIA's outlawing of their magical suspension. And they've had a hard time getting the aero to work using standard suspension parts, the non-hydraulic ones. But where they have always had a seeming advantage, or they have shown the most, has been in the kind of tracks that Monaco actually is in terms of the speed of the corners and the way they're laid out. And in particular, they're going to be at less of a disadvantage because they're not long straightaways with the hunk of iron that you call the Renault or the Tag Heuer in the back of their car.
It's a Renault, and yeah, it's probably not as down on power as it was last year. However, the Red Bull chassis is not the chassis it was last year either. They've been really struggling chassis-wise, and we are now hearing more and more that their legendary aero and chassis guy, Adrian Newey, is really not as involved in this car as we thought he originally was.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's not as big a deal. It wasn't like Newey alone by himself in a room drawing things and everyone just doing what he said. There's always been a great deal of teamwork there. But he has, now that he's done with Aston Martin for the moment, he has come back and is definitely having a look at things from sort of a hyper view and above view to see if he can plot them a way forwards that will allow them to be more competitive, at least at certain tracks that favor downforce.
Okay, and mechanical grip particularly. But let's be realistic. If Red Bull are going to win a race this year, it's here, isn't it? This is their big shot.
Well, Singapore might be one of the others, but yeah, this is a big shot for them. But I don't think they're going to have the quality pace to pull it off. To be honest with you, it's going to have to be a little bit of lady luck on their side. Of course, Monaco. So,
okay, let's say the guys do want to bet on the Red Bull drivers. They've got two very talented guys here, and there is no de facto number one in this scenario. And if you look at the odds here, both the Red Bull drivers are at 14-1 to pick up a race win. And you could say it's kind of 14-1 for them to get the pole, because if they were to fluke a pole position, and Daniel Ricciardo nearly did last season, then, like we said, they have a chance of holding on to it.
Yeah, Ricciardo was brilliant last year, but I got to say, looking at the way the car drives this year, I think it tends to favor Verstappen more. And if you were going to pick a Red Bull driver, he's the one I'd go with.
And tell you what, guys, if you don't know, Max Verstappen is looking to be an absolute legend in the rain. So if you see a few drops of rain coming on Sunday, put a quid. Oh no, hang on. What do you use? $1. Stick $1 on Max Verstappen, because he has been phenomenal in the rain. The difference between him and Daniel Ricciardo in wet conditions has been stark.
It has, but I think it's even in dry conditions too. The problem they had when they ditched the suspension is they lost the downforce, and the car is looser and tends to snap suddenly. And let's all recall that Verstappen has only been driving the Red Bull for 1 year. Before that, he was at Toro Rosso, used to less downforce. In fact, many speculate that's what caused his race-ending error. He simply wasn't used to a car that went exactly where you pointed it. He was used to having to...
Well, that's right, because he was actually hitting the inside of the corners,
Yes.
hitting the apex quite hard when really he should have given himself a bit more space. Hopefully he's learned that lesson now. But there's very few people that are fancying Daniel Ricciardo over Max Verstappen this season.
Yeah, well, this goes back to the point that I'm making. Ricardo, how long has he been driving the Red Bull?
A few
Much
years, yeah.
longer. He's used to a certain kind of downforce and car that he no longer has, whereas Verstappen had only been used to that car for a year and had more time in cars that were generally much looser. I think this gives him the advantage until they really get the car sorted.
Okay, let's go through a few of the betting markets for the race then. Who do you fancy for the race win, Matthew?
Well, you got to go with Lewis Hamilton. The Mercedes has the edge in qualifying. Lewis has the edge in over Bottas in qualifying. So at the end of the day, you'd have to pick Hamilton for the pole position and the resulting win.
Yeah, and Lewis Hamilton to win the race is actually at 5-4, and it's quite rare that you will get Lewis Hamilton in a Mercedes at better than even money. So that probably does represent a value bet. However, he has a history in Monaco of not always nailing qualifying. So, you can't always rely on him to be there on pole. Normally, you would say it would be his race pace that would get him past his teammate. 5-4, though, is good odds for Lewis Hamilton. 11-8 for Sebastian Vettel. Very, very capable of winning the Grand Prix as well. But my pick for the value bet is Valtteri Bottas each way. He's 13-2 on William Hill. So each way will get you first place or second place at a third of the odds. So we're talking 4.3-1 for him to finish in the top two. And I think that is a value bet. All right, let's go on to the next driver market, Matt. The fun one here is not to complete the race. So drivers to not finish the race. And there's a few characters this season that we don't trust to make it all the way around a Grand Prix.
Yes. Well, I think this brings up one of the things that I'm not sure the listeners are aware of, but they have installed a new curb.
Oh, this is big.
At the exit of the swimming pool chicane. And now, normally, they've been calling these things sausage curbs. We've seen them before. They were responsible for Jolyon Palmer's crash when he hit it and it unsettled his car. We've seen them take a couple of cars out. But looking at the particular design of this one, I'm going to suggest that they rename it the Mutilator, because I think it's going to be destroying suspensions and front wings and sending a lot of cars into the wall.
In fact, Romain Grosjean of Team Haas, the American team, has said that this is going to launch cars and it looks aggressive. And most people, most commentators, most social media commentators are predicting that curb will actually disappear because we'll get some carnage in the practice sessions and that will be gone. But speaking of Jolyon Palmer, the British driver, the British guy who has struggled this year to keep up with his more talented, arguably teammate Nico Hülkenberg, is even money to not finish the race. And that, I think, is a great bet because, as we've seen this year, Matt, he doesn't mind a barrier or two, and there's an awful lot of barriers in Monaco.
Yeah, there's not much room for sloppiness if you're actually trying to race, and he would be a very good one to put some money on.
Okay, and for the guys not so familiar, Lance Stroll, a rookie who has been rather crash happy so far this season at 5-6. And who else could we have? Even money is Jenson Button. Now, Jenson Button is making his return to Formula One, having retired last year. But as you Americans may know, there's a small little meeting called the Indianapolis 1, 2, 3. I cannot remember the name of it, but he's competing. It's 500. It's not 500 miles, surely. That's very far. So Fernando Alonso is competing in the Indy 500, and Jenson Button, who is the 2009 world champion, is jumping into his seat. But the McLaren Honda cannot finish the race. It can't seem to complete more than 5 laps without choking out on occasion. In fact, Fernando Alonso has not started one of the races.
He actually hadn't finished a race till Barcelona.
There you go. So I think Jenson Button, not used to the 2017 cars, in a car that's breaking down a lot, at even money is a good bet to not finish the race. And not to complete the race, I take to mean not classified. So do watch out. I think if they get within like 95%, they are classified, but those Hondas have been breaking down an awful lot. So not to complete the race. Fastest qualifier, I would say that Lewis Hamilton is by far the favorite to qualify. Anyone else who might throw up a surprise in qualifying?
Vettel
at 11-8.
You look at, again, 11-8, you look at his performance minus the chicane in Barcelona, and you could argue that pole position was actually kind of in reach for the Ferrari. And it might very well be this time. Again, maybe the Mercedes is favored a little bit with most of the type of turns they have, but they won't have the same engine advantage because they're not running longer straights.
So I can't tempt you with Valtteri Bottas at 7-1, who has taken a pole position this year.
Well, you could tempt me with that, but you're not gone to it yet now.
Yeah, but that's got to be a value bet. 7-1 for a Mercedes driver to take pole at Monaco.
Yeah, I'd take 7-1 to hedge anything else that I did, no problem. And Bottas may have trouble in the race, but we know for a fact he can drive a fast lap.
In fact, I'm going to just double check that that's not a misprint from William Hill, because to me, that has value written all over it. Yeah, maybe 8 times out of 10, it's not going to, well, in fact, that would be terrible maths. Look, I think that's a value bet. Don't make me do maths live on air. Okay. Put a points finish. Now, the top 10 cars get a points finish. So this is quite a good market because the midfield is really, really competitive this year. The one I'm picking out at the moment is Pascal Wehrlein in the Sauber as an outside bet for a points finish.
He would be my number one go-to bet. Sauber has shown up with several mini aero updates at Monaco. They have a new side pod configuration. And as we all know, Ruth Buscombe got him through a one-stopper at Barcelona that wound up seeing him well into the points. Of course, he was helped by the carnage on the first lap, but nonetheless, if you were looking for a value bet, that would be the first place I would start. And I would stay away from Van Dorn because don't forget, he's got the not 1, not 2, but 3 grid spot penalty.
Yeah, that was a brainless shutting the door on, was it Felipe Massa?
Yeah, I don't even remember.
Oh, I think it might have, yeah.
It was after he'd taken all those grid penalties to have the brand new power unit elements. For Monaco, so that they might actually do well after Alonso's brilliant qualifying in P7, and he just threw it all away.
Talk about letting the side down. The rookies have really struggled. I think the rookies are ones to avoid at the moment, Matt.
I beg to differ. Sebastian Ocon might be worth a shout, and Force India ahead of Red Bull might also be something to watch out for very carefully, depending upon the stint lengths that the ultra softs are able to run. Force India has made a lot of points by going long and doing one less stop. They're clearly running well now. They've got their correlation issues sorted, and yeah, depending upon the numbers, they might be a very, very good choice.
Actually, yeah, I'm just looking at the bet for both Force India drivers individually to finish within the points. Now, both those cars are top 10 cars, very, very capable of finishing in. Sergio Perez 4-9, not so exciting. Esteban Ocon 4-6 for a points finish actually does represent great value because he is slower than Sergio Perez, we'd say, but only just. He seems to follow him home quite well. So, yeah, that's an absolutely great shout, Matt. But back to Pascal Wehrlein, 5-1 for them to score points. Now, Sauber arguably are the slowest team on the grid, but this is Monaco. Mechanical grip more important than aero. And I've heard from motorsport.com technical editor Matthew Summerfield that Sauber have turned up with enough upgrades to make that a good bet.
Did I not just say that?
Yes, but I reiterated it in a far more handsome way. You're welcome. Okay. So we're looking at the podium, the top 3. Now, this interests me. All things being even, Matt, on Sunday, the podium should be some combination of Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, and Valtteri Bottas, because Kimi Räikkönen in that second Ferrari just isn't performing, and really those are the top 3.
Yeah, and in fact, aside from the very obvious notion that I am dusting you in the fantasy league, that's pretty much what I go with. Hamilton, Vettel, Bottas will score you the most points week in and week out.
Okay, the kind lads at Sportsbook Review did say that we could plug our stuff, Matt. And the fantasy league you're talking about is fantasygp.com. We are a league called Wrong But First. If you want to find the details of that, find us on Missed Apex Podcast on Facebook by searching Missed Apex Podcast on Facebook. You can come in and join in our F1 chat on there. That's where we tend to hang out in the race reviews. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at Missed Apex F1. And I'm at Spanners Ready. And that there is at MattPT55. If you want to talk F1, hang out with us. We think we're brilliant, even if we do say so ourselves. But for the podium finishes, what we're really looking for bet-wise is guys who are attracting more than even money. That's the bets I like to look for. The over even money bets that are value bets, that makes me feel smart when they come in. The 3 guys we've mentioned there, Lewis Hamilton, 2-7 to be on the podium. It's barring mechanical failure. Even if he has a complete shocker, he's likely to end up on the podium. Sebastian Vettel 1-3, Valtteri Bottas 8-11. So beyond that, if we're looking for a surprise on the podium, Kimi Raikkonen 13-8, he's in the prime position to pick up the pieces if anything goes wrong.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. And if you look at the numbers, he's still ahead of the Red Bull, but it is Monaco. And I'd be very curious to know what Verstappen's odds of picking up P3 were.
Well, both Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, the Red Bull boys, are at 7-4. That's not a bad shout, actually, because Kimi can go missing in a Grand Prix, which means if he does, you're only looking for one of the top three to have an incident. And there's plenty of barriers around Monaco, plenty of people crash out.
Well, and more to the point, he has a history of just running into people who won't get out of his way.
He does, and threatening to punch them in the face.
At Monaco, especially at the hairpin, seems to be his favorite place to do this sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I would tend to favor one of the Red Bull bets for that last podium spot if you're looking to spend some money.
Okay, so let's go for the glory bet for the podium. I've got 4 for you to pick from, and I want you to pick your one out of these. Okay, so a glory bet: Sergio Perez in the Force India and Esteban Ocon in the other Force India are 16-1 and 33-1 respectively. Now these are glory shots, but do either of them tempt you?
Yeah, the Ocon one does, just because it's so far out. I mean, it's such a huge return on such a small investment.
I think a lot of things would happen to make that come through. And the other two, Nico Hulkenberg 33-1. If you want a real glory shot of the Renault driver coming through and picking up the pieces in a high attrition race, perhaps if it's wet, Nico Hulkenberg 33-1 to pick up a podium might be that one. Matt, I'll go on, Matt.
It's not going to be wet.
Oh, have you seen the weather forecast?
I've seen the weather. Right. It's going to be nice all weekend. In the 20s, in European money, and sunny.
That's a shame, because Monaco in the wet is actually a race. In the dry, yeah, you are talking line astern, and it is beautiful to watch the cars go around there and to see them try and eke out a place to pass. But sometimes you see drivers give up and get mugged.
Yeah, and this is the thing. A safety car is almost a certainty at Monaco. And the strategy in the safety car, and if there's a virtual safety car and through the pits and the tire changes, is really going to be where races are won and lost. And thankfully, Mercedes has a long history of never making a strategy error with pit stops under the virtual safety car.
Oh dear, 2015, I was so mad. I was so mad at the TV. I yelled at the TV at my wife's grandparents' house. I'm not necessarily welcome there. Hey, finally, Matt. Finally, you know I am a huge Lewis Hamilton fan. As a Brit, he is our 3-time world champion. #44, El Liono's natural successor, the best British driver since Nigel Mansell. However, it's never worth betting on him. It's hardly ever worth betting on him. If you do want to have a bet on Lewis Hamilton, this is the only one that is worthwhile. Pole position, fastest lap, and race winner treble, 9-2. And I'm going to put a few quid on that.
That there is a good shout.
Now, if he has a dominant weekend, the fastest lap is the only thing that's a bit of a shuffle. What was tempting me on this is there's not really going to be any glory laps at Monaco. With the tyres lasting so long, you don't get people bolting on a soft set to set a fastest lap or do a really short stint like you used to get in the era of the chocolate soft tyres. In this era, where the tyres are pretty hard, what you're going to get is a standard one-stop race. So I really don't see like a Sauber bolting on super softs and setting a fastest lap. It's going to be Lewis Hamilton if he's in form.
Yeah, it will. If it's a race, and
if it's a race,
well, you know, in the sense that it's not a lot of wandering around behind a safety car, and people are generally trying to maximize how fast they go. He's likely to go fastest if he's being pushed by Vettel.
Excellent, guys. I hope you enjoy the Monaco Grand Prix and you check it out. If you do watch that race and you want to understand what it was all about afterwards, come and join us on the live stream. Search for me, Spanners Ready, on YouTube. We do a race review normally at 8 p.m. on a Sunday, UK time. You're going to have to do a bit of an adjustment there. This week we have a bank holiday, so it will be on the Monday night. However, if you search Missed Apex Podcast on your podcatcher of choice, be it iTunes or one of the Android ones, I use Pocket Cast, search Missed Apex Podcast and you will hear us chatting about Formula One. Any last words for our kind host, Matt?
I would just say of all the races, Monaco can be the most unpredictable. So look, yeah. So look for your long shots. If they're going to happen, Monaco is a place to get them.
That just leaves me to say thank you very much to our hosts at Sportsbook Review, and I hope we've done enough to be invited on again. Guys, be sure to leave a comment and say how much you loved us. Follow me at Spanners Ready and that guy at Matt Patey. Ooh, said it wrong. At Matt PT45. Oh man, I miss having the ability to edit these things. 55. Ah, it's all gone wrong. The wheels have fallen off the wagon. Follow him at Matt PT55 and see you soon. Have a great race.